Okay, all right, this is gonna be fun. We are rolling. So it's DROdio, and I am here with Alex. Alex is the first product manager that Armory hired and became our product leader. This is years ago when Armory was just getting started. In fact, you were also our first customer, which I think is pretty amazing. And we're gonna do a little retro of some of the learnings of Armory throughout the years. So do you want to give a quick intro of yourself, Alex, as a starting point?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for doing this, DROdio. My background is in engineering. I've been doing software development for many, many years. Started as a software engineer doing e-commerce shop development. And after that, my career took me to work on security, distributed systems, large scale internet problems. I worked at a variety of companies, a lot of background in security and building products for highly technical personas, which include security engineers and developers. I ended up working at a security company where I met Armory founders, and we were in the middle of implementing a project, which we're probably going to talk about later on. Got it to a successful rollout, and I decided to pivot my career from engineering to doing product, just because I was always passionate about building tools for developers, and this was a great opportunity. So I ended up joining a small team at Armory, and here we are today.
Here we are today. Awesome. Well, let's rewind the clock all the way back, and I've pulled some photos out of the archive here. So this first picture is actually at my and Sue's house. So this was, I'm sure you remember this. This was a dinner for early Armory investors. And what I always tell founders is, like, how do you find your own Alex Bello? And this is somebody that is so passionate about the work that you're doing that they are interested in being an advisor and a customer, and eventually they're so passionate they want to do for the world what you did with them at their company. So like advisor, investor turned employee and leader at the company. So I'd love for you to just kind of share. You were giving a speech. I don't know if you remember what you were saying. This must have
I
been.
don't remember what I was saying here, but one thing that I do remember is that when I was in the engineering role at Lookout Mobile Security, and we were in the middle of rolling out Armory to the entire engineering team. I remember kind of feeling this a lot of excitement about this particular space and problem that we were trying to solve, and to a point where we started having conversations of, hey, I want to work on this full time. How do we make this happen? And the conversation came about, well, you have to invest into Armory. And so this was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. It's like, okay, it sounds like these guys want me to join them, but they also want me to actually put my money, my own money into this. It's like, this is a first. I never got a job where it's like, you're gonna get a pay cut and you have to pay money to work here. But I was okay with it. I think I was excited about the problem and the people that I would get to work with, because I got to know them working at another company, and they were doing the implementation. And I think that's another point that was pretty interesting. Is the founders were very methodical and on point. They were literally camping out in our offices, coming in every day, early morning, very organized, like with one goal in mind: learn as much as possible about how to deliver value to this company, and get to higher and higher adoption and remove any blockers for adoption. So this was also one of the indicators for me that I want to work at this kind of company. I want to work with these people because they're going to get stuff done. Yeah. So I think in this particular, this was kind of an example of the drive that the founding team had at the time, is to learn as much as possible, bring as many people as possible together that know anything about the space. And this was an example of bringing investors, bringing, so I think this was probably all the seed investors plus some additional people that were interested in investing in the follow-up rounds, bring them all together and ultimately learn as much as possible from them, what they're seeing in the space, but also kind of get them excited through people like me by putting them on the stage and saying, hey, go inspire all these investors that you've never met. It was a great experience. And I think I probably just talked about my experience at Lookout Mobile Security and my excitement about the problem that we're solving and how real the problem is. I think that's kind of what I ended up talking about.
Yeah, that's what I remember as well. And I think the key thing here for founders is how can you find an Alex Bello? And the way that I would describe you back then when you weren't yet at Armory is you're a subject matter expert, so a progressive thinker who was looking to bring new technology in to solve a problem that you were having. And then how do you build a really, really strong relationship with somebody like you, like Alex, so that that person can become a really big champion and maybe even such a big champion that they join the company. And so I don't know if you have any advice for founders that are looking for people like you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really great point because I found that through advisory is actually the best way to learn both sides. And I'm advising a couple of companies today. I've always been kind of advising venture capital, and I have kind of a bunch of contacts that ping me once in a while and say, hey, can you go do a deep dive on this company, or can you evaluate this company? And in some cases, I get pretty deep with these companies where they actually want to bring me on as an advisor and continue working together. And so I spend some time in their Slack teams answering questions or everything from business strategy to product strategy, and really kind of getting to know the team. So it's I think it's a great way kind of for both. Now, where do you find people like me? I think depending on what space you're in, if you're in developer tool security, there's plenty of executives on LinkedIn that you can kind of look at their profiles and see what they've been up to, and you can just reach out to them. I would say majority is probably going to be interested in some sort of advisory role, and there's no payment is not really the point here. I mean, you get some small amount of options, but it's just kind of a symbolic thing, and you don't have to even have it. I think some companies actually don't allow you to have it. But if you want, you can have that small token of appreciation. Some actually have paid advisory roles, but I mainly just do it because I'm interested in what the company is doing. I want to help them with the knowledge that I have, and you just never know. I mean, what this can lead to in the future. So it's always, I think, people in executive roles who you want to get some sort of advice role, or maybe very senior ICs are usually open to advisory. You can just go find them on LinkedIn and reach out to them.
Great advice. I also I just pulled up a photo of us in the Lookout office. So you mentioned this. I think this is a really, really important point. We were embedded in your office, maybe 3 days a week for something like 3 or so months. Just really getting close to you, understanding what it was that you needed. We hadn't built very much at this point. We were really just taking the open source project and bringing it in. So I think you mentioned that, and that feels like a really important thing, getting close to the people that have the pain and really understanding how to solve for it. So I don't know if you have anything else to say about that.
For sure. And I think that's kind of continued on in the DNA of the company. And I think it's really important to foster that kind of culture internally of, spending a lot of time with customers. I think that, I don't remember what the saying was about hours spent. I'm sure you remember it. Hours spent with customers versus hours spent in the office. We actually have it written on the wall at some point.
An hour with the customer is worth 8 hours in the office.
Exactly. So I think that's a really important point for early stage companies, and I think generally even any company, is spending as much time as you can for product and engineering, spending that time with the customers and really learning and seeking out the real problem. Because as we learned over time, a lot of problems that kind of flow into your product and engineering organization through other groups having conversations with customers are more like orders to build software. They're not actual, a lot of times they're not the actual problem. They're more proposed solutions. And it's very easy to get caught up with just building those solutions. It's the easiest thing to do. The hard part is to actually invest the time and build those relationships with customers where you can find out what the real problems are.
Okay, all right. So then moving on in the journey, you joined Armory and we did an offsite. And I just wanted to specifically call this out because it was so much fun. This was a little get to know you exercise, and it was a timeline of Alex Bello and your experiences. So I just, I wanted to pull this picture up because it's so important to build that deep level of trust and understanding about the whole individual and not just their professional self. And I think this was your idea. In fact, I think you're the only one that ended up getting it done that night, because this ended up going for like 2 hours. It was so good.
Yeah, a lot of mine was involved as well.
Yeah, a lot of mine was involved for sure.
I think nobody was up for doing their timeline later, but I think yes, I think it's very important to connect with, especially for the executive team, to connect on the human level and really kind of learn about each other, because in high velocity, high stress environments such as startups, tensions arise, and if you know somebody as a human being and them on a deeper level, a lot of these tensions could be resolved quickly. And if you don't, then ultimately these tensions get to a boiling point, and people explode, and there's a lot of bad things that can kind of flow from there. And so I think it's one way that I've done throughout my career is with this timeline exercise, and I've actually done this with several of my teams in my previous roles as a way to kind of get to know each other. And it consists of a timeline of from your birth to now of high and low points. And so you just kind of draw this timeline, and then you map out your high and low points, and then you talk about them. And I think that brings people closer together on a deeper level.
That's awesome. That was a lot of fun. Really,
there's other exercises like that. I think there's a few that I've done with teams around colors and different personality mapping, but I thought this was a little bit more or maybe less standard.
Okay, all right. So we did that, and then I put maybe these two pictures in. So this is from our first real office, really to kind of contrast what it used to look like to build product with what is happening mostly today, which is that everyone is not in one office, and it's a lot of globally distributed and remote work. And I was actually curious to know, in this new world that a lot of startups are living in, what are some of your tips to recreate some of the richness of the office environment, whether it's specific tools, like for example, we used ProdPad to prioritize work back in the day, or just any other thoughts that you have about how to build product in an async culture.
Yeah, I think Slack kind of comes to mind as a way to do that. There's a lot more kind of workflow automation that can be done in Slack today. And I think we're gonna probably talk about Slack later on, but I think nothing obviously compares to kind of sitting close next to a person or being able to talk to somebody over lunch and throw out ideas. So I think there's definitely Um, there are definitely tools out there that kind of help with those interactions. I think we as a company started using a lot of Slack from very early on to interact with our prospects and existing customers, and I think we were kind of ahead of our time at that time, kind of anticipating that we're all going to be using only that as means of interaction. But we had a lot of in-person communication as well, where we flew out and spent time with customers and took them to lunches and dinners, and I went out to get drinks with them and really got to know them on a personal level. I think that's a really important thing, and I don't know if you can really replace that in any way with Slack today. I think we're all still learning how to use Zoom and Slack more effectively. But I think the only thing that comes to mind here is just better, better follow up with people that you're interacting with. So I think kind of being in the office and just randomly turning over and seeing somebody reminds you that, oh, I forgot to ask him something, right? And you just ask him right there. When you're sitting in front of your computer, unless you have some sort of a tracking that you're set up, reminders that you have set up to ping somebody, it will really not come to your mind. So nowadays there are more tools that are, enabling you to see your whole team in real time, and kind of simulate some of that. So I'm probably going to kind of go down that path of how can you get the closest to people that you interact with on a daily basis? How can you see them more? So when you do have those impromptu thoughts about doing something, you can look at that person on your screen and they're live in there, and it's not just somebody's profile picture. But yeah, I don't have a lot of great ideas on how you can be more engaged. I think there's plenty of guides out there on how to be more visible when you're operating, in the remote type of culture. So there's a number of things that you can do from that perspective, and a lot of it comes down to you pushing out information on a more consistent basis. Where when we had more kind of in-office real-time interactions, I'd say it was kind of a nice to have. It wasn't as much of a requirement, but now if you want to prompt interactions, you kind of have to push out information. You have to be more visible. You have to interact more with people in Slack. And so that just takes extra effort. I mean, I would really optimize for, if you have a question, just go ask the question, right? Go type it in Slack, get into that habit of, if you have all of your customers in Slack and you're wondering about something, you should have to kind of retrain yourself to, hey, let me just go ask somebody, who's in our Slack team. Let me just go ping him in Slack real quick and ask him this product question, right? I think it's not what I just described, doesn't come natural, I would say, to a lot of people.
Let me scroll down to this specific one, because we were using Slack and we were bringing prospects into our channels 4 years ago, and it's something that I'm seeing a lot more startups do now. But I think even today, I don't see these founders doing the level of kind of deep customer discovery as we did in Slack. So I actually pulled this from a shared channel, and I think this was a great example of a new feature that we were thinking about building. And we actually created this Slack blaster, this automation tool, to be able to send this question out to a number of prospects, or I guess customers, about new features. So this was the new feature, and then you had a list of questions here, and we got replies literally within minutes, which was amazing. So I don't know if there's anything that you would mention about that, because I haven't seen a lot of founders actually doing that.
Yeah, I think creating automation around this type of workflows, we were trying to optimize for one, velocity, and two, just lack of many product managers. And so that's why we created this automation that enabled me to create these templates. So anytime I wanted to do some problem validation or ask questions, I would use that tool to kind of blast many channels at the same time. And there are pluses and minuses to that, but or positives and negatives to doing that. But it worked for us really well in the beginning. We kind of had to scale that down a little bit after a while. But yeah, I think this was very useful. It was near real-time feedback. I think it's very rare when you get that type of a feedback in a matter of minutes, especially if you have majority of your customers in Slack, which I think is pretty common for many startups now, as you said. So, and I think, having this workflow automated internally, which you can now do a lot with Slack workflow automation, can be very beneficial to kind of scaling out your the validation, especially if you're trying to find product market fit and you got to quickly iterate on a bunch of different ideas, and you don't have a lot of time because every hour you're burning cash, and you got to get quickly to the value, and so you want to get as many people, as many prospects and customers engaged, and get the truth, the ground truth from them as fast as possible. So in contrast to kind of when I've worked with more traditional product approaches and product managers from kind of larger companies, sometimes it takes weeks setting up the calls, getting on the calls, asking the questions live, sometimes even going to see a customer. So validating something simple could take months, and you really don't have that time as a startup. So yeah, I think this was a great example of one of the validations. We used to do them all the time, and we would recruit prospects and customers to participate in our early releases. We would post videos and blog posts I think the idea was to get as much validation as possible and as much interest as possible, and input as well.
I mean, I'll have to see if I can find it, but I remember that we used to do things like this where we would pull out our phones and just take literally a video of us on the whiteboard where we've whiteboarded out some sort of a workflow.
Yeah, that works really well, actually.
Yeah,
So surprisingly for me, I think that's one of the things that I learned at Armory from the founders, is just optimizing for velocity and just putting out very raw information and data out there, because you just never know what's going to come back. And the 99.9% of the time, even from the most raw information like sketches on paper that was taken a picture of and posted in Slack, prompted some really interesting conversations with prospects and customers. So you'd be surprised. A lot of people try to polish things up as much as possible, but and I think they'll probably argue that you don't want to look bad in front of the customers or prospects, that you're putting out kind of lower quality, low fidelity stuff. But in reality, that's it's probably it's way better than spending time and not getting the input right away.
Yeah, I would say it's even more authentic when it's just a sketch or up on a whiteboard and it's showing customers the culture, which is, we prioritize velocity and we're all about helping you ship continuously. It's the same kind of concept with ideas.
And surprisingly, not a lot of people do that. It's, I've only met a few people that really kind of optimize for that. Even at the startups that I'm advising, I mean, I don't see that happening. I mean, I guide them towards that, but it's kind of like you have to experience it to really see the value, right?
Another surprising thing that I don't see founders doing nearly as much as I think they should is to put a little bit of CRM structure around the activity. And so I'll pop this up. We used Pipedrive before we moved to Salesforce. HubSpot is also a great alternative, but there were so many days we were just literally the execs were sitting around one table selling together. And you're really a secret weapon. I think any company that has a great engaged product leader, that can be a secret weapon, because it's so easy for you to say, hey, I'm not trying to sell you, I just want to learn from you, I just want to listen, I want to understand your pain. And you just did that so well. You were just like,
Yeah, it's very easy. Like yeah, I think that was because in the past I was in the engineering roles, and typically my engagement with the sales team would be coming in and talking about scalability of the platform, the uptime and SLAs, and just instilling that trust. I was never, I mean, that was my part of the selling. I would not be actually selling the value of the platform itself to the end user. And so at Armory, it was very easy to have sales conversations for me, because one is I understood the space really well, and the technology, and two, I was really kind of coming from somebody who's like really passionate about the problem, and being in the product role, it's very easy for me to engage people about the problem. And so inadvertently I will also talk to them about some of the solutions that we've built to the problem. So I was like the best salesperson,
yeah,
because I could really have a lot of empathy for the pain they're having, and at the same time craft a solution that may or not exist, only exists in my head, to the problem, and get them excited about it. So it's like the ideal, I think, the ideal salesperson. But yeah, I would do it under the guise of, I'm trying to learn more about the problem. And it's not that I didn't want to learn about the problem. It just kind of typically turned into a sales conversation later, without me really pushing for it. So I think it's you shouldn't be coming in with the mindset, I'm going to trick this people to buy from us by saying that I just want to learn about the problem. I think genuinely you should come in and try to learn about the problem, and ultimately, if you come up with the right solution, they'll buy it.
yeah.
But it's a way to engage people for sure. I think it worked really well on LinkedIn. I've done a ton of reach out on LinkedIn, just asking different engineering leaders and CIOs about specific problems that they're having, and that I wanted to talk to them about those problems. And as we got to talking, we ended up talking about the solution too.
Mm-hmm. Two other quick photos. Let me see if I can find it. So one was, we took you with us when we went to visit customers. This is a large financial institution in New York. And just having you in the room doing those same things was so awesome and valuable. Just like, I can't overstate the impact and the importance of having a product leader involved in that early stage. Let's call it between seed through maybe up until Series B, maybe even through Series B, but definitely the Series A, where it's, there's a bit of an exec team and everyone's just really in it every day. And the execs are just, like, having the product leader be really involved in those conversations was amazing.
Yeah, I think it depends who you're selling to. So I think if you're selling to SMB or mid-market, I think for mid-market it's probably important. But if you're selling to enterprise, a lot of times, when you're a startup, you're trying to project this big company persona on them. It's like, hey, we're a startup, but we're also operating like a real company. And so when you're coming in, they're obviously expecting some kind of a dialed in processes on the product side, and they're expecting you to have some sort of a roadmap, and have some release cadences, and some more kind of methodical thinking about how you're building product, how you're prioritizing. And so having that in place, I think, just gives them confidence ultimately that they're dealing with a company that is trustworthy and solid.
And to that point, just to go a little bit deeper there, one of the things that you did exceptionally well was really leverage lead feeder And I want to just talk about it for a second because I don't know how many people know about Lead Feeder or things like it. So this is a screenshot of Autodesk, who is a known Armory customer, visiting our website and specifically visiting pages of our website. And I think I just watched you really learn about what their interest was by kind of following the breadcrumbs of what they were looking at and really folding that into the conversation, which I thought was so good. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was yeah, I think that was like I've thought about Lead Feeder early on in as we were trying to get more customers, and I think we were trying to figure out like which company should we be talking to, and obviously not having any marketing department at the time, or not doing any marketing. The only source was like who is actually coming to our website, who is looking at our stuff, and we optimized quite a bit in the beginning for search engines. Put a lot of effort into documentation, which I think kind of paid off very early on as well, because a lot of our inbound was essentially driven by SEO and by the content that we're producing. So the more content we produced, the more kind of free leads came in. But not a lot of those leads converted, and you had a lot of kind of lookers that we saw the traffic on the website. Unfortunately, Google Analytics is not that great at telling you like who's actually coming in. So I remembered probably maybe like 6-7 years before Armory, I was at a company, and we were kind of facing the same question as like, how do we get leads, and what's the fastest way to get leads? And it was SEO, but why are those leads not converting, and who's actually coming in? And we ended up buying like a GeoIP database and like trying to resolve our website traffic and seeing like what IP blocks they're coming in from, who's owning those IP blocks, and then trying to find people at those companies. And this was very much automated. The whole thing was automated, literally just the JavaScript on your website. You set up a few workflows to get you notified about people visiting different sequences of pages or combinations of pages, or coming in from different industries, or you can kind of slice and dice a lot of this data. But to what you were saying earlier, I think one is like you can go find people that are likely looking at your website on LinkedIn, and Lead Feeder connects to LinkedIn, and it's able to identify almost the right contacts at LinkedIn, at least the ones you can ping. And then from there, you can look at the trail, and it also shows you like how many unique people actually came from this company, and what did they do, what path did they follow. And what you can do there is you can kind of get to the next level of intelligence, and that's really analyzing the path, analyzing the types of, if they're hitting up your knowledge base or FAQs, and then they're landing on certain documentation pages, you can kind of craft a story of what they're interested in, and what type of problem they're likely having that they've come to your, that they came to your company website for. And that makes the conversations a lot easier when you actually find the person through, let's say, LinkedIn outreach, or they end up doing inbound. When you get on the first call, you can kind of talk to them in context, right? And that makes things a lot easier as far as the conversation, because you can immediately bring them the information that they're likely here for. You can put a lot of things in context that you want to sell to them or whatever. So I think a couple of things that are very useful here, for product development, this is something that you can use to recruit early customers, right? Because not all of them are going to come to your website and ultimately submit, because you can look at the path they've come to. So if you're working on a new functionality or feature, and you can look at the path that they went through your website and they landed on something around the new problem that you're trying to solve, then you can kind of identify a cohort and then actively go after that cohort if you're trying to bring kind of a non-customer type of users for your new feature. So I think that's kind of a useful part, and obviously in addition to being useful for the sales team to have more tailored presentations when they're getting on calls with customers.
Yep. Executed incredibly well. I just watched you do it so many times. You just fold it into conversation. It's like you have the magic, uh, checklist of the things that they care about from having done that research. Okay, so now I want to share my favorite memory with you, which was at this whiteboard. And I think the thing that's so magical about this to me is just to reiterate to founders the importance of partnering with a product visionary, a product leader who has in their head an idea of what the future could look like, kind of beyond the roadmap that's been defined, and really learn to tell that story effectively. So we spent some time around the whiteboard crafting a story for Armory, and I must have told that story a couple hundred times. I mean, I told it in every candidate interview. I told it in every VC funding pitch, and the genesis of it was like literally this photo right here, where we were just jamming on it, and it makes me
Not
think of.
the most flattering picture of me, I guess, but yeah. I don't know what to think about it. It's like, is this the proudest thing, or is this just
It's my favorite memory.
yeah?
Well, there's this thing that Martin Casado talks about magic beans, and that this makes me think of that, this idea that as founders you have to get your magic beans defined, and it's that story that you tell and how you take something to market, not just taking it into market, but how do you get the market to understand and value the magic. And that to me is exactly what we were doing at this whiteboard, and it was just so incredibly valuable for the company. So I want to say thank you for that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think some of these things came to fruition, some of them didn't, but
Yeah.
I think it was a really fun experience for me personally to try to get this kind of broader vision, a lot of ideas that I had accumulated over the years, trying to build developer platforms and tools, trying to get a lot of that thought out, and just get feedback on it and get some other people kind of jamming on it with me. So that was an exciting, I think, time. It ultimately is probably a lot less cluttered and jumbled up as what we ended up with, but yeah, good times.
Yeah, that was great. In fact, there's some videos of me walking through the SDLC, and those videos are out in the wild, but it all came from this whiteboard session that or I guess we did a few of them, but these whiteboard sessions that we did. Okay, one more since we're almost out of time. I don't know if you remember this dinner with James Green after Series B. We just closed Series B, and we asked James, what are some of the things that companies that just closed Series B don't get right, that they haven't invested in? And I remember he was talking about the importance of spinning up customer success, which we had not invested in at that point, and we ended up investing a lot in it over the next couple of years, and I think really realized how vital and critical it is, which
Absolutely.
makes sense when we say it, but you're just jamming so hard, you're not really investing in anything enough. So, but I didn't know if there was anything else that you remember from that kind of time.
I don't remember much from this particular dinner, but
Well, it was all
I
the
do
wine.
remember the customer success. Yeah, I remember the guidance around customer success. I yeah, I think we ultimately underestimated the importance of customer success at that time, and kind of I think scrambled a bit to get the function in place, hire the leader. So looking back now, if I were to do it again, I would definitely optimize for getting that set up as soon as possible. Just because it takes time for the customer success team to one, learn the product, two, build relationships with customers to a point where customers are open with them about issues, and they can leverage existing customers to showcase the success and have them do um, webinars and press releases together. It's not just the role of the sales. I think it's really important for the customer success to be there, and ultimately, if you are building a platform or a tool that's going to be used by a large group of people within an organization. And if it's an enterprise, you're most likely are going to need customer success to help you with that, unless you build something that gets organic ground up adoption, and just everything is built into product for virality, and it just spreads on its own, doesn't require kind of dealing with any kind of internal processes and business units and compliance and security and other blockers that typically prevent from something kind of organically spreading. Customer success is essential, and a lot of it is relationships that a customer success team builds with your champions, who ultimately in larger organizations end up introducing you to other business units and being your champion internally. And customer success is kind of a link between everybody in your company, product, engineering, sales is linked to that champion, right? Yeah, so they're also your internal champion for your customer. So yeah, I think it's really important to have the CS team early on, and I think that's definitely a lesson learned for me. And I don't know what else to add there as far as customer success. I think it really depends on the type of product that you're building, and that's going to kind of dictate the type of a customer success team that you're going to have, whether it's going to be technical account managers and customer success managers, whether it's like a technical component there, or if you're going to have solutions architects and plus some professional services. All of that kind of lives in customer success. But I just remembered another guidance that I would have around customer success is that to make sure that it's very closely aligned with sales. This is also a lesson I learned maybe 2 companies before Armory, is we had separate customer success organization and separate sales organization. And a lot of times their objectives are misaligned. Sales team wants to close new deals. They don't really, I would say a lot of times they don't really care what happens to the deal afterwards. And customer success is really ensuring that after the sale is done, that this customer continues to be successful and expands. And so when it comes to product, both of those things kind of come in. And if sales and customer success are not aligned, you're going to see a lot of kind of deals closed that maybe the communication wasn't as great with customer success, and so they're on the receiving end, and all of a sudden some nuances about the customer environment or customer requirements were missed, and they're not able to expand unless this new functionality is built, which ultimately ends up going into product. And product is unprepared for that ultimately, because this didn't get fully discovered, as an example, in the beginning of the sales cycle. So sales team sold, a lot of times that happens, didn't do full discovery, didn't bring customer success into the conversation early on to approve and kind of validate that we can actually make this customer successful. And as a result, like I said, that builds up a lot of tension and pressure across the whole company. So when you're aligning sales and success together, I think that leads to better outcomes, meaning that if they roll up to the same leader, and I think that would be, I guess, my recommendation. I've seen it, I guess, not work really well when those are separate organizations, but I've seen it work much better when they were under a single leader that made sure that, for example, account managers are also responsible for success and expansion in addition to the technical account managers. So they're working together to both close deals and expand them. So that also means that the sales team is incentivized through expansions.
I think Matt File, the founding CEO of DataStax, had a really great way to describe this, which was everybody talks about land and expand, but there's a succeed part in the middle. And if you don't have the success piece, then you won't have the expand piece. And really positioning customer success to be able to be successful with the customer for all the reasons that you're just saying is a really, really good way to think about it. So thank you for that. Okay, I've got actually one more thing that I just realized. So this
Sure,
is
let's
a
do it.
photo of you running an advisory council meeting, and that's actually Matt right there. So here's the backside of Matt. But this this here is actually a mock-up, which I'm sure that you know because I think you built it. And
I built it like the first week that I joined.
yeah, okay. So do you know where that mock-up ended up?
No, where did it end up?
On our patent. Literally, that mock-up is
Oh
one of
wow.
the drawings on our
Okay,
patent.
yeah. I actually somehow I missed I know about the patent, but I missed that mockup. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
legendary mockup. We
I
actually
know.
never ended up building it, but
Yeah.
it's legendary. It's actually was a precursor to Dora metrics. This is actually a big part of this is what ended up being Dora metrics later on, like a year later, I think it came out. But yeah, this is some flashbacks here.
I know, right? Yeah. So, but I think it's a great example that that mock-up was something that we put in front of customers and prospects to force a conversation before we actually built any code on the back end. So I think it kind of comes full circle.
Yeah, and we did learn that at the time, at least they didn't feel like it was important. So I think that was a good data point from the advisory board. And I'd say because of the having joined a few of the advisory boards for startups, I definitely noticed that they don't quite know how to leverage advisors. I mean, I've run an advisory board, and it took a lot of time to kind of manage the relationship and actually get value out of it. But if you get the right advisors, you can get actually a lot of value out of them. And so, if you at least put some structure around it, and you put the structure for these advisors to kind of work in, they can deliver a lot of great value to you. And I've given some pointers to a few companies on how to run these boards to get more value out of me ultimately, because I join advisory boards, and then once in a while I get a ping, and I'm like, why did you guys even bring me in? You gave me options, but I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything. And so it just turns out that they don't really have kind of any kind of structure or format for this advisories. But like I said, I think you can get a lot of value out of them if you put some structure on it. And I think we had some great advisors. Not everybody in the advisory council was super valuable, but I think the people that we did have with little effort actually gave us quite a bit of good guidance.
Yeah.
And another, I wouldn't say it's a trick, but it's a tip. You can get a lot of your customers to join the advisory council. It's not a board, it's a council. And you can, I'd say a lot of customers and your champions, they would be more than willing to do that because of their own kind of personal career ambitions, because it's always good to put something on your resume that you're an advisor to somebody. And so I'd say a lot of people coming, from senior engineers, principal engineers to executives would be more than willing to participate in the advisory council. And you can just leverage that advisory council for product feedback. And it could be a once a quarter thing. It could be a Slack channel. But you just need somebody in your organization, somebody on the product team, or whoever is responsible for kind of organizing customer feedback, kind of run that. A lot of times, you have product advisories from many companies or product advisory boards. But I found it's pretty easy to recruit people into it. And, you can obviously, I got a lot of people from my network and from our customer base that were, they provided some really good, insightful information to us, and you just got to keep them engaged. I think it's also a great tool for if you have a more established customer success organization, they can run this customer advisory meetings as well.
Yeah, it's probably a whole other separate founder culture.
Yeah, it's probably a whole other separate thing.
How to run that effectively, because you're so right. It can go, it can be so binary, and a lot of it is about setting up the right structure for the advisors to be able to turn into, incredible relationships like we've crafted over the last 5 years. And it also,
yeah, and you may end up, ultimately hiring some of these advisors, because that's like the best way to, to get to know them.
Yeah.
Right. So this advisory, once a quarter advisory meetings and having them in Slack, and some people get really engaged and they get really excited about the type of problem you're solving, to a point where they'll be like, hey, I want to join you guys, and I want to help you, make this very successful. Right. And I think that's the kind of person you really want on your team.
Totally agree. Well, speaking of that, thank you so much for this trip down memory lane. It's been awesome. I actually, your camera shut off on me, or maybe it's on my side, but I can't actually see you right now. So, but I can still hear you, obviously. So thank you. It's really, really been awesome there we go. Now you're back. Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks for organizing it. I think this was a good kind of recap down the memory lane, and
yeah, totally.
Very cool.
All right, cool. All right, have a good evening. Thank you. Take care.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.